welcome all of you to participate in this BoF meeting. So in this afternoon, we have invited 6 speakers who are going to introduce the current status of the IPv6 deployment in a country or in an organization, and also introduce the research and development work related to the IPv6 readiness measurement criteria. So, firstly, I'd like to give my appreciation to all of the speakers. And for the sake of time, I'd like to suggest each speaker may take 12 minutes for presentation, and therefore we can have 3 minutes for discussion. So let's invite the first speaker, Mr. Carlos Martinez from APNIC. Carlos, please.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carlos Martinez. Thank you very much to the chairman of the session for the introduction. And first of all, I want to apologize because I'm very jet-lagged, so I may say things that sound silly or nonsensical, but I can blame the jet lag. So, what is APNIC? Most of you know what is APNIC, right? You're here at the APNIC conference. You know APNIC is the Internet Address Registry for the Asia-Pacific region. Well, APNIC is a sister organization of APNIC. We provide numbering resources, IPv4, IPv6, and autonomous system numbers for the Latin America and Caribbean region. You have there a small map. The part of the Caribbean that APNIC covers includes most of the all the Spanish-speaking islands and some of the English-speaking islands. There's a historical reason that has been lost in time, I would say, why some islands in the Caribbean went with one registry or the other. So, the work that I wanted to present is a field study and survey that we did in our region, trying to answer one main question, which is, why is IPv6 deployment in our region only slowly progressing? And in addition to that, try to identify successful deployment experiences and understand the drivers that actually motivated organizations to deploy IPv6. This is a joint effort between APNIC and a development bank called Banco CAF, who actually finances most of this effort. APNIC contributed with the technical expertise and the human resources to do this effort. This was done during the second semester of 2015, so the data, some of the data that I'm going to show you is some months old, and some of the data that I'm going to show you is being measured like approximately once a month. This report and some of the results that I'm going to show you are published in this address. This report has been translated into English, so you can download a PDF file with a full report. I must warn you that it's almost 200 pages long, so we prepare for a long read. I mean, you can skip some parts if you're more interested in one thing than others. So the report is structured in several parts. Includes the result of a survey that we sent to all of the members of APNIC. APNIC has approximately 6,000 members, almost 6,000 members, and trying to understand, again, what motivated them to deploy IPv6 or what is keeping them from deploying IPv6. Trying to understand or identify current best practices, real current best practices among operators, and also include the points of view of different stakeholders like ISPs, content providers, governments, and academic networks and universities. So, main results. We consider that the main results of this report include three things: the results of the field interviews, the results of the survey, and this allowed us to produce two things. One is an indicator that we call IPv6, which is the Spanish acronym for Key IPv6 Deployment Progress Indicator, and an economic model, which is an application, sort of sophisticated spreadsheet that you can use to get an estimation of the investment that you need to make in order to deploy IPv6 or not. This is something that is very interesting about this model because it includes, as a possible outcome of your transition strategy to the post-IPv4 world, the possibility that you, for example, decide not to deploy IPv6 and just do CGN, or even, for example, buy addresses in the market. One of the things that we consider very interesting is several runs of this model actually show that the strategy of deploying CGN and buying addresses is only good for a very short term, and all of the longer term strategies must incorporate IPv6 in some form. So for the indicator, the goal of the indicator is try to sort of express the level of readiness, the IPv6 readiness for a country, right? It's based on similar work that has been done by other organizations, particularly Cisco has a very similar indicator. But in our region, we thought that the different weights that Cisco assigns to the different parameters do not actually represent the current stage of deployment in our region. So we decided to do something based on the same idea, but do it in a slightly different way. We use data from different sources, particularly from APNIC, thanks to Geoff and George, but also from Cisco, from Akamai, and from Google. Thank you very much for all those who let us use their data. So, given that I'm a little short of time, I'm going to skip the part of the formula. You can read this in the report and the slides. And just let me tell you that the indicator has two factors, or two terms, one that expresses planning, or tries to assign a score to the planning stages of deployment, and another that assigns a score to the actual deployment part, right? So in a perfect IPv6 country, this indicator should be 1, okay? So I did a couple of visualizations. I split the data between the top performers and the rest. This is Latin America and the Caribbean, measured during last month. Our top performers, this is interesting. We have Ecuador, Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, which when we did this for the first time wasn't there. This is a recent addition to these top performers. Cuba, which is interesting because it has a lot of work done in the planning stages, but has almost no traffic, but anyway, it scores highly. Colombia and Peru. Peru is also interesting because it scores a little lower because although it has one autonomous system that has a lot of IPv6 traffic in users, the rest of the autonomous systems in Peru have little to no traffic, okay? This is the current view of the indicator for Latin America. You can see that there are sort of three clusters, if you will. The lower part, which are the most or the best prepared countries. There is a bunch in the middle who are actually trying to improve what they are doing. And then we have some countries that are lagging a little bit behind. I ran this model for Asia and the Pacific yesterday, and I got this. This, according to our measurements, these are the top performers in this region, right? Malaysia, Japan, Singapore, Sri Lanka, India, and New Zealand, okay? This is the same thing. You can see that there is a lot of effort being put in the region, right? If you compare this is Latin America and Asia compared today, okay? You can see that although Latin America has a couple of very strong performing countries, On average, the Asia-Pacific region is putting a lot of effort into deploying IPv6. You can see the taller bars everywhere, okay? So, the face-to-face interviews, we visited 10 countries. It took a lot of effort to identify operators who were willing to have interviews, visit them, coordinate the visit, blah, blah, blah. We chose a benchmark set of countries with one exception, which was Brazil, because Brazil is very complex in itself. And NICBR, which is the NIR for Brazil, has done similar work in the past. Not exactly the same, but similar work in the past. And Brazil, at the time, was not showing any IPv6 traffic, but let me show you how this changed very quickly. Successful experiences. These are 3 operators who started from almost nothing, and in the course of 3 or 4 months, started having significant IPv6 traffic for users. Ecuador, CNT Ecuador is the incumbent, the state-owned incumbent. Comteco Bolivia is a small cooperative ISP. And Telefónica Peru is a large operator as well. Brazil wasn't initially part of this work for the reasons that I explained, but while we were doing this report, this happened. Can you see how it went from 0 and grew very, very quickly? Brazil is a huge country. This shows that given enough interest and effort, you can get significant traffic, IPv6 traffic, even in very large economies. You can see which ASs are the ones that are actually generating the most traffic. Belize is a very small country. It's, I think, less than 1.5 million inhabitants. Almost have little traffic, started having traffic. Trinidad and Tobago, this is interesting because in this IPv6 traffic in Trinidad and Tobago comes from a new operator in that market. A new operator that started operations in Trinidad and Tobago and couldn't get any addresses to begin operating except for a /22, which is what our current policies allow us to give them, okay? So this was an operator, and we had a couple of conference calls with them, who was forced to do IPv6 in order to actually start operations in a new country, which is I think will be the hallmark of ISP operations in the future years. Some findings that I think are very relevant. For example, almost no one is planning in our region to use transition mechanisms like NAT64 or FORK64 XLAT. Everybody is planning to use private IPv4 plus a ZGN and public IPv6. For me, this was very interesting. I'm going to need a couple of more minutes, sorry. Sorry. So, problems. Most of the problems come from the CPEs. CPEs that are not IPv6 enabled or cannot be made IPv6 compatible. For the governments, the main problem seems to be the software or software platforms that are used for public-facing portals. And another thing that is interesting that was mentioned many times by operators is the fact that the provisioning systems are not IPv6 ready. The provisioning systems are somehow tied to IPv4 addresses in a way that makes it very difficult to use them for provisioning IPv6 only services. So the economic model. The economic model I already mentioned at the beginning is a tool that you can actually use to model different scenarios, different transitional scenarios, and get an estimation of how much money you are going to have to invest. Sadly, currently the economic model, the tool, is only available in Spanish, but we're working on translating that. So this few references. This is where you can download the data yourself if you want to. As I said, this is updated periodically. And thank you very much.
Are there any questions? I have one question.
Sure.
As you mentioned in your presentation, right now the weight of the infrastructure is 30%. So it's very good for for the country, your region. So do you have any plan to decrease the weight in the next few years?
Yes, actually, our current idea is, if we just decrease the weight of one of the parameters, it becomes difficult to compare them over time. What we plan to do is actually have a sort of family of indicators that are suitable for different stages. We will keep measuring this one, but we will start measuring a new family of indicators with different weights, so comparison over time is possible.
Okay. Any other question? So I have a souvenir, so just for...
I think there is one question.
There's one question.
Okay, one question, okay.
Now, it's very interesting to see that Trinidad and Tobago has an IPv6 only operator, but he's got a /22, right?
Sorry?
He's got a /22 allocation from the last allocation. And is he using it, or is he only using IPv6?
They are using it. And this operator in Trinidad and Tobago, which is called Digicel.
So, but /22 is nothing for a sizable operator,
I think they actually got one /22 from us. They got some /22 from other local, very small cooperatives.
So they are giving IPv6 only to the customer and then translate and doing XLAT or something?
They are running private IPv4 and public IPv6 to the customer.
All right, okay.
This is a very good, what I believe will be a very typical new operator in Latin America for the next coming years.
Okay, thank you, Carlos.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's a souvenir. I'd like to invite the next speaker from Akamai, Mr. Kanzi Yang. Mr. Yang, please.
So, hello everybody. My name is Kem Seung. I'm one of the network architects from Akamai. So today I'm going to talk, hopefully quick enough, to talk about how Akamai deploy V6 with some data that we observe, particularly with mobile network, and some data that we measure for IPv6. So these are the motivation that we observe that why we have to deploy V6. So because Akamai is one of the major content delivery provider, so we make sure that our content customer, that they want their content to be delivered via V6, then we can deliver that. So this is more like a customer driven. And then of course, we also want to encourage the community to use more V6 because IPv4 is going to running out very soon. So this is how we deploy the V6. Basically, it's very simple. So today, we just basically dual stack all our servers to both V4 and V6 capable. So you can see that in the diagram that on the end user side, we can deliver traffic from both V4 and V6, depend on the user request. So if the user is V6 capable, then we will deliver the content via V6. And then from our cache server, we get the origin via V4 or V6, depend on the content origin. So it's pretty much simple that we deploy of our V6. So as of today, we already deployed networks with IPv6 in 106 countries and over 1,900 locations with 700 network providers. This number is actually not that impressive because we are actually still seeing a lot of network partners that are not able to support V6. So we are actively encouraging our network partners to support V6. So if you are one of our Akamai partner and then you support V6, but you haven't enabled it on our Akamai node, let me know. So, and these are the driver that we see that the traffic growth for V6. One is content availability. That is more Akamai is playing part in. And how we do that is we basically, before the customer have to explicitly tell us, hey, Akamai, I want my content to be delivered in v6. Then we give them a dual stack host name, and then we can hand out a v6 record. But nowadays, because the v6 is getting more and more popular, we think that this is a critical point that for all our customers, we default, we just simply give them a dual stack host name. So all our customers nowadays, the new customer, then we just simply put them on a dual stack host name, and then we can deliver their content via v6. So hopefully we can encourage more content to be delivered via v6. And we're also seeing that the access provider getting more and more to support v6, especially like in the mobile network, because mobile subscriber is growing tremendously, and they are the one that who usually let off IPv6, a lot of IPv4 address. So we see like Verizon, T-Mobile, Comcast, they all have a very high percentage of v6 traffic. And finally, the end user. So the end user is also playing a major part. For example, now, like all the Android OS, all the iOS from iPhone, they all support v6. And all the new Mac or Mac OS or like Windows, they all support v6, which is quite different than like 4 or 5 years ago. The v6 you have to still manually enable, or the OS may not support that. But nowadays, all the end device, they are all v6 capable. So all these three drivers, they are actually driving the traffic growth. I'll just highlight, and then next we'll talk about the v6 in mobile. This is quite interesting because we see quite substantial of v6 traffic that we observe in the mobile operator in US. So for the top 4 US mobile operator like AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, they all deployed v6. Of course, the way that they deploy is a little bit different. But you can see that, for example, like T-Systems, they are deploying a pure v6 only access network. And of course, they have to do the translation for if they have to access a v4. But on the access side, they are already a v6 only. And there's some statistics that we also see is based on the device type. We see that 70% of the v6 traffic is actually from Android and 30% is from iPhone. That's because for Android, they actually send the v4 and v6 requests at the same time. And then, for Android, they actually requested data for v6 first. If the v6 is not available, then they try v4. So there's a high percentage of traffic using v6 on Android because Android try v6 first. And iPhone is actually trying v4 and v6 at the same time. So it depends on which one coming back first, and they use that type. And this is a deployment how people can do a v6 access only network. So in a T-System, they actually do a v6 client. And then of course, if they have to access a v6 host, then they just go straight via end-to-end via pure v6 network. But then if you have to go to a v4 host, they just have to do 2 things. One is NAT64 together with the DNS64. So the DNS64 will translate that into a synthesized v4 address, and then they will go to the NAT64, and then from the NAT64 they will resample the synthesized v4 address back to a public v4 address. So in this way, then they don't need to deploy like v4 private address or using expensive carrier net or NAT64, NAT44. So this is quite a simple way to deploy a v6 network. And other subset data that we observe on a mobile network is actually mobile v6 could be better performance than v4. So number one is because there is fewer boxes if you have to deliver the content like to v4. Versus like if you have to deploy private address, then you have to do translation, NAT, or you may even have to transparent proxy. So if you have to do all these things, then it actually have to go through more boxes. Then you do adding latency, delay. You have to pack more. You have to do more packet processing. So the data that we observe is overall the page load time compared v4 and v6 is actually have a 10% better in terms of page load time. So that means if you download a web page via v6, it's actually faster than v4 because v4 you still have to get rid have to go through a lot of middle boxes. And the end-to-end latency, the client-to-server latency we observe is actually v6 is lower also, because again, it's because it have to go through bypass all these middle box. Then, so the client-to-server latency is lower in a v6 network compared to a v4 network that you have to do a lot of NAT. And yeah, this is some data that we observe on our platform since this year is the 4th year launch since IPv6 launch. So now we are trying to move all the customer to a dual stack hostname by default. So this data showing you that in terms of the address, in terms of hostname, that how many a dual stack at this moment. So you can see that a majority of the requests is actually requesting to a hostname that already dual stack already. And sorry that is all small graph, but you can actually show it on our website. So you can see the percentage of IPv6 requests after 4 years of IPv6 launch. So this is the percentage of V6 requests that we observe. So Malaysia is the top in Asia, primarily due to TM, they have a good job, and then Japan is mainly due to like KDDI. Australia will be Telstra Mobile, and then Singapore is like Sahab M1, they're all. South Korea will be SK. And in India, we observe actually also very interesting for India. This data is still a little bit old, but in India, the new mobile operator like Wio, they actually offer free mobile data service. So we can see that their traffic is going tremendously, but because they are new payer, they don't have enough V4 address. So they also have a lot of heavily deployed V6 on their network. And actually we see nowadays like 60% of the requests is actually coming with V6 nowadays. In Taiwan, it's like about 1%. And then this is the network provider. I think some of them I just mentioned. In terms of the network provider, we observe a lot of is from like all these providers. They are all in like mainly in Japan, Malaysia, and Australia. And just go for this. This is a report. The state of the internet report is a report that we publish quarterly. Basically, we collect all the Akamai HTTP log, and then based on that log, we observe all the data that we observe. Yeah, so a few highlights here for the SOTI report that we measure. Number one is we actually observe the number of V4 address actually declining from 808 million down 1% to 800 million. We're actually seeing this is a good sign because people are actually not that rely on V4 address. Of course, you may argue that people are actually moving to carrier grade NAT, so there's less IPv4. But we're actually seeing less V4 address, especially like in the US, because people are actually moving to V6. And in terms of country, Belgium is still the leading. I think they have been leading for a few quarters already, that they're still leading up in terms of IPv6 adoption up to 38%. We see a lot of US mobile operator, they also have a lot of high percentage of V6 requests. And here's the breakdown per network provider. You can see the ranking. So in the US, the top access provider, the mobile operator, they all have V6 implement. In Asia, we will be like Japan and Australia. And these are the countries for the top 10. Unfortunately, Asia is not in the top 10. But we can see some Latin America here, the Ecuador, Peru. They actually also have quite substantial of V6 traffic that we observe. I think, like Carlo mentioned, that they may have been running out of V4 address. But in Asia, we show you the data already that is leading by like Japan, Malaysia, and Australia at this moment. And if you want to know further about all this IPv6 data, we actually publish all this on our website. So you can go to stateoftheinternet.com/IPv6, and then you can see a data per network or per country. So you can see, okay, how is your country doing, and or how is your network provider is doing. So this is a lot of people actually also quoting our data source. And this is the data that we observe in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka, we started seeing the IPv6 traffic growth like starting from this year up to like 0.8%. It's still a little bit low, but it's actually growing. So we see more and more V6 traffic in Sri Lanka. And actually, this is more like particular, I just highlight one of the network operator here in Sri Lanka, Dialog. They actually have 6.7% of requests that we saw is V6. And this all I have, so I just want to summarize that Akamai, we simply use dual stack to deploy V6. We saw observed that a lot of US mobile operator, they have V6 enabled or simply a V6 only network. And IPv6 performance could be better because if you bypass all these middle box, we're seeing a healthy trend of the V6 measurement. Of course, this is very country by country, but in overall, we see a growth there. The Europe and the US is still leading in terms of V6. I think Asia here, we need to work harder to grow for the V6. That's all I have. If you have a question, just email me.
Are there any questions for Kenji? As I know, Akamai is also a very famous company for security. So up to now, most of the customers are concerned with the security issue related to IPv6. How do you deal with this problem?
So in terms of the CDN platform, so we basically simply we use a approach we call distributed defense for distributed attack. So because most of the attack is distributed, so we just let the attacker the traffic coming to our closest server. And most of the case, because our traffic is actually mainly outbound, so if you're talking about inbound attack, we actually have plenty of bandwidth that we can absorb that. So it's not a major issue for us in terms of like volumetric attack. Unfortunately, I don't have the data specific for like V6 attack that I have. Yeah, but I can try to look for that later.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm curious about the slide with the data with the different countries.
This one?
Because there is I hadn't seen Ecuador. Yeah, Ecuador is there. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I thought it wasn't there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kenji. I'd like to invite the next speaker, Mr. Rahana Pariyagura from Sri Lanka, Sir CC. Okay, Mr. Marara, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very good evening to you. I will describe what is the situation in Sri Lanka related to IPv6. In Sri Lanka, we have already 10 ISPs, so I have listed them here. And if I give a little bit about the history, what is the evolution of IPv6 in Sri Lanka? We set up a IPv6 work group in Sri Lanka. Actually, it was set up in 2011 under the Telecom Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka, which is the regulatory body for telecom networks in Sri Lanka. And the main objective was to identify what should be done and when it should be done to improve or deploy IPv6 in Sri Lanka. And related to what should be done, as a working group, we have to identify what are the specific targets and what are the specific things and when it should be done to do a successful implementation of V6 for all the ISPs in Sri Lanka. As a part of the working group, it was decided to develop a roadmap. And the areas of focus of the roadmap was national impact assessment. So at that time, it was some of the ISPs were exhausting their IPv6, and they have started deploying IPv6 as well. So at that time, we decided what is the impact to the different kind of services. If they deploy IPv6, what is the impact? And what is the repercussion of exhaustion of IPv4? And what is the policy and regulatory framework? And what is the infrastructure readiness of all the ISPs? And what is the human resource development related to IPv6? And what is the awareness and publicity? And how are we going to manage the transition period from IPv4 to IPv6? And what is the implementation plan? So those are the things that we consider when we are developing the roadmap. And as a result, we could develop 2 documents. They were in drafting stage, which was first one was the national IPv6 roadmap and IPv6 address assignment policy. So those were in the drafting stage, but unfortunately after 2012, we couldn't continue with this work group because of the political situation changes and the people who are leading in the TRC was changed. That's the unfortunate thing. But even though there is no encouragement from the government as well as from the respect to ISPs aggressively to implement IPv6, most of the IPv6 deployments and the core networks of the ISPs were ready to provide services through IPv6. So I will focus on 2 main ISPs in Sri Lanka Telecom and Dialog. Regarding the IPv6 allocation and the BGP advertisement, in Sri Lanka Telecom, the core network is ready for IPv6, and all the IPv6 prefixes have been advertised in BGP, and all the uplinks are dual stack, so they can support IPv6 as well as IPv4. Related to Dialog, their core network is also ready for IPv6, and they are providing IPv6 addresses to the customers as well as advertising them in the BGP. For example, customer IP blocks, they have given mainly to Learn and Lankaclom, and they have advertised them in the BGP. Related to network traffic over IPv6, actually Sri Lanka Telecom, they have given less number of IPv6 connections, so they haven't actually measured what is the IPv6 traffic related to IPv6 networks in Sri Lanka, related to IPv6 in SLT. Because most of the connections are still IPv4. But from the Dialog, we got that figure is 5 Gbps on the peak time. They measure the IPv6 traffic separately. Related to IPv6 readiness of the end users, there is no demand. I spoke to both ISPs. I went there and meet them. They said what they said was there is no request from the service customers. Because of that, at the moment they are focusing on providing IPv6 connections to the enterprise users. So there are several requests from SLT, from the enterprise users. So they have deployed and given IPv6 connections for that enterprise customers. And they are still not providing it for the retail customers. But from the Dialog, at the moment they are providing dual stack for the customers. For 4G, they enable dual stack, but for the 3G, it's single stack. And most of the terminals are IPv6 ready. So at that time in 2012, when we were discussing about that, the main issue was the readiness of the CPEs. Because at that time, most of the CPEs were not ready to provide IPv6 connections. But now I think Dialog has overcome that. And SLT also have planned to, when they are procuring new CPEs, they have decided to take all those devices with dual stack ready. And Dialog is ready to provide IPv6 fixed broadband connections for enterprise users. And they have also found that there is less interest from the general public to get IPv6 ready connections. And some people think that NAT is a security mechanism. So even though there is a possibility to get IPv6 connection to the enterprise users, they still think that NAT is a security mechanism. So there is less request from the enterprise as well. Regarding the DNS query from country code top-level domains of IPv6, all DNS servers of SLT support dual stack, and Dialog is still planning to deploy dual stack support for all the DNS servers. At the moment, some of their DNS servers are supporting dual stack, but not all. And web services availability over the IPv6. Sri Lanka Telecom has published, their site is supported in dual stack, and all the web servers in the IDC are supported by dual stack, and NAC64 and DNS64 is ready for all the services they provide. And again to Dialog, currently their website dialog.lk is dual stack, and customers are a bit reluctant to have IPv6 because they think that there may be potential security issues. So I think we need to aware customers on IPv6 what kind of repercussions, and maybe they have some doubts about taking IPv6 connections. Related to security, which I found from SLT is some of the devices, the signatures that they get doesn't support IPv6 traffic. Still they support IPv4. For example, antivirus providers, IPS IDs, they don't issue signatures which support IPv6 traffic. And Dialog, they have done research, and they have found that their CPs are not hackable. Because some people think that when they provide static IP, IPv6 to CP, somebody can connect from outside to that particular device and hack into the computer or the network. So Dialog has ensured that that cannot be happen through their devices. And end-user security is provided by the end-user operating systems and antivirus and firewall, etc. There are some issues at the moment. Default settings for most of the CP is IPv4. So if there's something happen, and if they reset the device to factory default, it will go to IPv4 only. So at the moment, SLT is going to have a deal with the service providers, the providers of the CPEs, to set up the firmware so that even though the device is factory default setup, it will be dual stack. Regarding to Dialog, CP readiness and lack of customer awareness is the main issue. So I think as service providers, we should aware the customers. Actually, it is seamless to the customer, but sometimes the customer will have a doubt about the connections of the IPv6. And these are the future plans of the Sri Lanka Telecom and the Dialog, issuing the CPs with dual stack, support by default, as well as from Dialog, working on to provide the static IPv4 for mobile sector. I think NAC64 and DNS64 will enable those services. And they can provide the IPv4 for mobile phones, 3G dongles, but at the moment, unfortunately, the devices are not ready. Thank you very much.
Any question? Any question? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. The next speaker is Jane Run from KISA, Korea. And Ms. Jane, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jin from KISA of Korea. I'm really enjoying here in Sri Lanka, and I really love black tea here. It's my honor to participate in this BoF because I was planning to join here from 2 years ago, but now finally I have an opportunity. I'm going to give a short and brief presentation about V6 measurement in Korea. So this slide is our current status. We started from our first ISP, SK Telecom. We started our commercial service of IPv6 on LTE mobile network from 2014. So we have more than 6 million mobile devices having V6 native. And from last year, we have cable TV service through V6 as well. And V6 internet services are not being provided very well yet, but we have users, that's the point. And in Korea, we separately see between the V6 readiness and V6 usage, actually. So I can say that about V6 readiness, we do survey from several years ago, and about V6 usage, what you want to see is to take a glance of how it's being deployed. I'm sorry. So we started to see the IPv6 usage in Korea from 2 years ago. So these are the considerations. We start. I think IPv6 usage measurement starts from the question, what do you want to see through the measurement? So which factors do we have to consider regarding V6 deployment? So V6 deployment is basically by ISPs, so we see Korean ISPs on the up right, and they have peering through each other. It's supposed to be an animation, sorry, and then they have customers, business customers, and then individuals. And individuals, they have residential customers and mobile devices. And then businesses, they can be big players about contents providers, websites, applications, and then comparatively small contents providers or cooperation or something. So things we want to measure are, firstly, we want to have a deep understanding of our ISP circumstance about V6 exhaustion. Because, you know, I hope you know, South Korea has a bit good internet connection, internet speed, but regarding V6 adoption rate is not going very well. So we want to have a deep glance about V6 exhaustion status of South Korea, how lack of V4 addresses our ISPs have, and when they'll completely run out of IPv4, we want to see that. And about ISPs IPv6 deployment, we want to know how much they deployed on V6 on their backbone lines, their peering lines, and on their subscribers line. We do survey on their V6 measurement about V6 capable equipment, or anyway, this presentation doesn't cover our survey, but we do have survey, but we want to see the automatically reason. So we are, what we want to see is the number of V6 user devices and whether they are peered through V4 or V6. Oh, there's a typo here, sorry. And then contents V6 deployment, websites, application, and several others. And some use case which can be just through V6. And these are, until now, we can see, or we are doing that, or we are tracking some measurement results of Akamai or Google. We really appreciate their efforts. So our strategy is very simple. Global providers like Google and Akamai and Cisco, they have resources because the amount of data is very important regarding measurement, which we can hardly have. So when their measurement is fair enough, we think, we just track that measurement results. But when we think we need something more, we try to make an experiment by ourselves or make something more. So, okay. So from this slide, these are the statistics we are currently tracking. First one is, it's Cisco 6-lab data, but in terms of users' data, they are tracking Google and APNIC Labs data. So this slide shows the number of V6 devices in South Korea is smoothly increasing. And then second thing we are tracking is Cisco measurement. Cisco is doing very well in checking V6 enabled deployment, IPv6 prefixes and transit ASS. And for contents V6 deployment, they are seeing the DNS quad A record and then service ports, well-known service ports, I mean TCP/80 or TCP/53 or TCP/25, but they are using Alexa list. And yeah, this is what we are tracking. When it comes to the contents, the FQDN's list is based on the Alexa list, but sometimes there are some contents which are not of us, so we are doing it by ourselves as well. This is Akamai data of V6 traffic rate. I think it's very intuitive. It's the amount of V6 query on their CDN network. And speaking of South Korea, it's 1.3%. It's 39th in the world. But honestly, we don't know the exact reasons why the rate is sometimes picking up or goes down or etc. But when you see the results by network, it's continuously increasing. And fourth one we are now tracking is APNIC Labs VisAS. It means the number of BGP paths between Korean autonomous numbers. And on the left, the number of paths of IPv4 is very dense, but on the right, 6 paths is a bit, we don't have many paths of BGP on V6. So we have we had a measurement about something regarding this, so we are trying to convince our ISPs to be peered through V6 because it may cause a bit worse performance of V6. Fifth thing we are tracking is APNIC Labs V6 performance. Personally, in Korea, it has more than 300 pairing samples and from SK Telecom and Korean Telecom. And anyway, in Korea, the RTT difference is very huge. And we are measuring this by ourselves of well-known services such as web, email, and DNS. It's the same what Cisco is doing in their 6-lab website, but we are flagging whether this content is from real South Korean ones or not, because as an NIR, as an Internet Registry of Korea, what we want to see is the IPv6 deployment rate of our stakeholders. So this picture here is a bit outdated. 7th one is Google. They have V6. And 5th one is YouTube, but on the last column, we flag this is whether it's Korean one or not. We have some questions inside us, whether we are really desperately need V6 addresses or not, because I'm personally interviewing some people from ISPs or NIRs or governmental side, but sometimes I'm seeing some good circulation about, oh, we should go to V6 because we need it. But from some other ISPs, someone's are saying that, oh, we don't need it because it doesn't bring any financial direct benefit or additional revenue or something. So few years ago, Korea has the same situation. ISPs didn't want to deploy V6 because it just needs investment. And sometimes, and we also thought that maybe they have, well, enough amount of IP addresses, I mean IPv4 addresses. Although they are using CGN, they are doing that in very restricted area. So what you are going to figure out through those measurements is why were we comparatively being late regarding V6 adoption compared to our broadband deployment or something. So did our ISPs desperately need more IPs? So we are collecting some data set as well to see the forest, I mean worldwide, and compared Korea data to other countries like Europeans or Belgium, Greece, or, for example. And we are trying to figure out why did some countries or ISPs make it, I mean, V6 deployment faster than us. Measurement, which we are tracking or do it by ourselves. Thank you.
Is there any question for Jane? Yes.
This came from Akamai. It's not actually a question, but just want to clarify the data about the V6 that you are saying about in Korea. The data in Korea that we observe is quite interesting because number one is we only observe one of the major providers like SK Telecom, they have IPv6 requests coming to Akamai. The other provider like KT Broadband or LG, we don't see IPv6. And then the second thing, it also depends on our content customer itself. So if the content customer, they move out from content, they move out from Akamai, so they don't use Akamai, then the V6 traffic will be dropping. So that's why we see traffic that is quite frustrating because one of our major content customers, they're actually moving on and off using Akamai. So that's why the traffic is actually quite fluctuating. I just hope this explains the situation.
Yeah, thank you for explanation. Maybe we can see the exact reasons why the draft, because we are not being provided the exact reasons, right? So sometimes we see it's picking up, sometimes we see it's picking down, but we don't care about it that much. We just see the overall results.
Yeah, I understand. So we can discuss offline on that.
I'm Tomohiro Fujisaki from NTT. Just one confirmation. You mentioned about the CATB service.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. You mentioned about CATB
yeah.
service. That is not the internet service? Yeah.
It's cable TV providers. 3 providers of cable provider, I guess the names were CJ Hellovision and Hyundai HCN and CNM. They deployed IPv6 based cable TV service IPTV service on their subscribers.
Yeah, not internet service, but only
yeah, maybe sort of IPTV.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder if you found in Korea the same situation as our colleague from Sri Lanka found about some companies still believing that NAT is a security mechanism, because we found that in our region as well.
Yeah, hope we chat in offline.
Okay, sure.
Any other question? Okay, thank you, Jane. The next speaker is Fujisaki-san. Okay. Let's invite Fujisaki-san to introduce the Japan IPv6 deployment and measurement.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tomohiro Fujisaki, working for NTT, and here with the heart of IPv6 Promotion Council in Japan. Okay, let's start my presentation. And this is a summary of IPv6 deployment status in Japan. And from the network viewpoint, in Japan, many fixed-line ISPs have started their commercial IPv6 service, both for the enterprise users and the consumer users. And also, some ISPs have been migrating their IPv4 existing customers to their dual stack environment automatically. However, just now, few cellular carriers provide IPv6 service. But in Japan, we have 3 major telecom cellular carriers, NTT Docomo, KDDI, and SoftBank, and they all stated that they will start IPv6 full service on the next year. That is very, very big news. However, from the contents viewpoint, the Japanese contents readiness is not so big. From the government viewpoint, the service is increasing, but the private company service is not ready for IPv6 yet. Okay, and from next slide, I'll explain about the IPv6 readiness data in Japan from the core network viewpoint, access network viewpoint, user traffic viewpoint, application viewpoint, and the product viewpoint. Okay, first, this graph shows the IPv6 allocation prefix in Japan. As you can see, the allocated prefixes, the red line, and announced prefixes, the green line, and also the blue line, active prefix is increasing. And the next data shows the IPv6 penetration rate in the internet backbone. And the left graph shows the worldwide average of the internet backbone IPv6 readiness, and the right graph shows the Japanese average. And as you can see, Japanese average of the internet ISP's core network is much higher than the worldwide average. Then from the next few slides, I'll explain about the user-side readiness of IPv6. And here, target service is the NTT East and West Internet Access Platform. And this Internet Access Platform is not the internet service, but to provide the ISPs the access to user access to the ISPs. And for reference, I'll introduce the KDDI service and also the Tube telecommunication service. Okay, before that, I'll explain why we measure the NTT service. And this graph shows the fiber service trend in Japan. As you can see, top red line is the total number of fiber service, and the end of last year, we have about, sorry, it's hard to look, but about 37 million fiber service users. Sorry, red line shows the total broadband users, and the blue line shows the fiber service. And the red line, in the red line, at the end of last year, we have 37 million broadband users, and in this service, 37 million, about 73% is fiber users. And in this 70% fiber users, the NTT East and West have almost over half of the market share, so we primarily measure the IPv6 readiness in the NTT East and West backbone. And this graph shows the IPv6 penetration rate in the NTT East and West network. And as you can see, last June, we have about 18% of the IPv6 users of the total. And also, next graph shows the other provider situation. And as you can see, KDDI is finished to implement IPv6, and currently their fixed line users all users are dual stack environment. And also CTC, this is another provider, and as you can see, maybe also 90% of users are currently IPv6 ready. Okay, this is the user traffic viewpoint. this table shows the IPv6 traffic to Google servers. And as you can see, KDDI, the fixed line network is already 100% IPv6 ready, as I stated. And the Japanese main big ISPs create many big traffic to the Google servers with IPv6. And this graph shows the IPv6 user penetration rate measured by the Akamai, IPNIC, and Google. As you can see, Japanese IPv6 readiness is increasing year by year. And however, this slide shows the application penetration rate in Japan and worldwide, and with the web servers penetration rate. The left graph shows the worldwide average, and right graph shows the Japanese average. As you can see, web servers readiness is much, much lower than the worldwide average. This is one of the Japanese problem, and we have to tackle this situation. And this graph shows the almost same kind of server-side data IPv6 supported .jp domain servers. As you can see, the number of name servers are increasing, but the web servers are not increasing so much. And also, this is also the web services from the in government services. As you can see, end of last month, about 60% of Japan government web servers are IPv6 ready, and but this percentage is not increasing recently, so we have to push our government to implement IPv6. And this is the last data slide, and the number of products which got IPv6 ready logo in Japan. As you can see, the number of products itself is increasing, but recently only a few products got IPv6 ready logo, so we have to promote to apply IPv6 ready logo to the Japanese vendors. Okay, this is final slide, and as I showed you, many ISPs in Japan is IPv6 ready, and the user migration from the IPv6 only to the dual stack environment are ongoing. And also, major mobile carriers will start IPv6 service next year, so I hope we expect the IPv6 penetration rate in Japan is jump up in the next year. But we need to tackle to implement the IPv6 in the content area. So this is the Japanese problem. Okay, thank you so much. Any questions?
Any question for Fusizaki-san? Thank you, Fusizaki-san.
Thank you.
And the last speaker is Dr. Jinghen Gu from APNIC. So, Jinghen, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And Jinghen from APNIC. Today, my presentation is about Taiwan's IPv6 readiness. Okay. We know that Taiwan's promote IPv6 for many years. There are also have some common criteria: the IPv6 allocation and BGP advertisement, and the service availability and the usability. But we hope to analyze the more detail in these three common criteria. So we separate the government and the academic and the ISP to three parts to think about the three common criteria. So firstly, we talk about the status of IPv6 the deployment in Taiwan, government and the academic and the ISP. And next, in the following, we talk about the status in these three common criteria in overall of Taiwan. Finally, is the conclusion. In the government agencies, we in the last 4 years, we promote government's external services to upgrade to IPv6, including the DNS, web, and email services. There are more than 4,500 services has been upgraded to IPv6. So currently there are 95% reachability. So this is meaning big progress in services. The IPv6 usability in government networks, government service network is about 0.69%. It's still low, and it's in the next 3 years we will focus on promote the office internet access service in governments. So we hope to the usability will be growth in the next 3 years. Let me see about the academic. TANET is the Taiwan Network academic network. Its backbone has been upgraded to IPv6 for many years. Currently, the IPv6 usability has large growth in these years. It's around 38.96%. Because there are many schools, including the academic school, junior high school, senior high school, and the university, they have used the IPv6. So the growth rate is higher in this year. Let me think about the ISPs. In the IPv6 allocation, the BGP advertisements, this slide shows that around 48% of ISPs has applied the IPv6 addresses. There still have 52% do not apply IPv6. In the 48%, 18% ISPs has applied IPv6, but not announced the BGP routing table. The 30% of ISPs has applied IPv6 and has announced the BGP routing table. So still has many ISPs do not provide IPv6 access services in Taiwan. But we see the access services device. The internet access service we calculate as the cable, ADSL, FTTX, the wireless LAN, 4G, and 4G VoLTE. We can see many devices in ISPs. His access service has IPv6 capable, except the ADSL services. So in public wireless LAN and the 4G and the 4G VoLTE has 100% to support IPv6. And the fiber to the home is also have 94% to support IPv6. A device in cable still have 7-8%. So just the ADSL is based on our understanding. In Taiwan, there are no ADSL services will support IPv6 in the future. So the capable percentage is low. It is reasonable. And about the IPv6 in ISP, the service, we can see the statistics. It's around 10,000 web services support IPv6. And in DNS server is the 3,000 DNS server to support IPv6. And the email is about 420 email services to support IPv6. And we see the usability. In the overall IPv6 usability is around 1.6%. Its growth in this year from the 0.3% to 1.6% is about 5 times the growth. So we seen the general to see the 3 common criteria. In the first IPv6 allocation and the BGP advertisement is about 41.27%. This data is from the RAP NCC. And the second criteria is the IPv6 service availability. The data collected from the ALISA top 1 million websites is about 9.56% to support IPv6. And the last criteria is IPv6 usability. It's 1.6%. So finally, the ratio of the 3 common criteria, the IPv6 allocation and the BGP advertisement, and the service ability and the usability are growth in Taiwan. And the customers still need to be encouraged to apply the IPv6 access services in Taiwan. And the academic network deployed IPv6 to every schools. So it's the IPv6 usability is higher than governments and the ISPs. It's on my presentation. Thanks for your listening and study, right? Study, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any question for Jingheng? Any question? Okay, thank you, Jingheng. I'd like to thank all of you for your participation in this BoF meeting. Thank you very much. This session is closed. Thank you.